A big warm welcome to the visitors and delegates that we have here in the room today, and also a big warm welcome to our panel members for this second debate of the afternoon, which is about supply chain security. So the first thing I'll do is just a quick run through of our panel members, just a quick introduction. Summarise the sort of subject that we're talking about. You know, what is supply chain security? Why would it matter? And then I'm going to ask each panel member, just working in sequence, to let us have some of their experience and suggestions as to how supply chains can be kept running nice and smoothly, to keep those pick and place lines running, and to keep the products exiting the factory in a nice steady fashion. We'll do sort of 5 minutes. 5 minutes for each, which will take us about half an hour, and then we'll have some questions at the end, hopefully from both myself and some people out there on the floor. So let me work my way along the list, trying to pronounce names as clearly and correctly as I can. To my right, Mark Reinhardt, Managing Director of Whitehorse Laboratories. Gary Ramsdale, Managing Director of AEL Crystals. Brian Ellison, President, America 2 Electronics, and Pete Schopp, Vice President of Business Operations at Mouser. Got that right, hopefully. Good. The subject of supply chain security. I've discussed this with an awful lot of people over many years. It means different things to different people. At the end of the day, most businesses like to operate in a very predictable fashion, especially manufacturing businesses that have to invest so heavily in production capability. They need to know that their investments are operating efficiently and cost effectively, and that usually requires consistency in terms of the supply chain. And yet there are so many trip hazards in the world we operate in. It's a global business. Sometimes device manufacturers and distributors simply go out of business. Sometimes they merge, so your existing supply chain suddenly changes shape. Sometimes there are technology shifts and market trends which kind of spoil the traditional component flow into the market. Sometimes obsolescence issues appear out of nowhere. Sometimes those obsolescence issues then feed into counterfeiting activity, which again needs to be addressed quickly and efficiently. And then kind of right at the other end of the scale, I think we can safely say we've seen our fair share of things such as natural disasters, which have a real capacity to upset certain inventories of certain component types. And we've seen events over previous years that have impacted all the way through from semiconductor production all the way through to power supplies, and in one instance of all things, hard disk drives. So it's a very uncertain world, and manufacturers don't like uncertainty. I've spent enough time making things to appreciate the cost that comes with disruption in the supply chain. So here we have a group of people who spend an awful lot of time investing in processes and mechanisms and services that are designed to smooth, I would suggest, that supply chain side. And now I'm going to ask the panel just to give us 5 minutes of their time to explain why supply chain security is an important subject to discuss, and some of the things that they're doing within their businesses to mitigate those problems. So start to my right with Mark, please. Should just go.
Should just go?
Yeah.
Okay. Good afternoon. Thank you for your time, John. Name's Mark Reinhardt. I'm the Managing Director of Whitehorse Laboratories. As a test laboratory, I suppose our biggest impact or involvement in the supply chain security issue would be on quality verification, particularly, well, not particularly in counterfeit detection and prevention, but not limited to only counterfeit devices, also non-functional devices. As you mentioned, supply chain security is a very broad-based subject. We're going to try to, at least I'm going to try to narrow it down somewhat to the product quality factors, and not specifically what we're dealing with today, but some of the things that have actually led us into the situation that we're in today. It's somewhat, I think, refreshing and a little bit even ironic to be talking about supply chain management when some of the things that we're facing today are the result of supply chain strategies over the last 10 to 15 years, such as outsourcing, particularly of manufacturing, where we have transferred IPO, we have trained subcontractors how to produce our products for us, and those subcontractors some of them have evolved into direct competitors, and some of those those are devices that are being used into the market as the counterfeit devices. So there seems to be a bit of a paradigm shift in terms of the supply chain management, in terms of how far along that goes. When we talk about supply chain, we are talking about, again, availability of material, we're talking about capacities. All of those factors are generally, we've looked at it from the manufacturing level. And I think particularly in the case of product quality, one of the things that we're looking at is that some of these supply chain management principles that applied to manufacturers previously are being kind of pushed upstream to the distributors and to the end users themselves in terms of identifying quality product, where I think historically we would expect quality product to be provided by the manufacturer. And it's not the case that the manufacturers aren't providing quality product. It's that there are poor quality product, whether it be counterfeit or something else, that is getting filtered into the supply chain that has to be secured. One of the other things that we're looking at is that there have been recently particularly some good blueprints for supply chain management that are coming out for distributors and end users to look at. They may be specific to the aerospace technologies or aerospace and military industries, such as the AS9100 standard, the AS5553 standards. So while they specifically apply to aerospace and military, they are good blueprints for industrial and commercial activities in terms of how to write good supply chain management practices, policies, get your procedures in line so that you're now combating some of the things that we are facing today. Some of those factors, and I think Brian might talk about it as well, are things like supplier qualification, supplier management. Those are very strict aspects that on a purchasing level happens at a manufacturing level, but wasn't so much the case for component purchasing. And those are some practices that are being used today and are being heavily influenced today and are much stronger. There's a stronger requirement for them than there has been in the past. And also I think we're looking at some situations of there has to be some legally enforceable but also realistic standards and liabilities that are going to be enforced. There are some that are in place now, but we're not sure exactly how far-reaching they are. So those are some factors that we're also going to have to consider. But where we're looking at is, again, some of these things have been pushed up to the supply chain now that from the manufacturing side, it's now on to end users and distributors themselves to be protecting themselves from areas that were normally they were protected by their suppliers previously.
Okay, thank you very much. Over to Gary.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Gary Ramsdale and I'm MD of AEL Crystals. We produce frequency control components. Unlike most of the companies here, we are working as a manufacturer, so we have a slightly different approach to the stockists and distributors. Frequency control devices these days are often custom produced, and one of which the majority of our customers have sparse knowledge, shall we say. And for this reason, we have to be able to take on that responsibility for them to ensure that the product gets to the production line on time and working. As a company, we're committed to providing a total support service for our customers, and whether this be an initial design consultancy or a feasibility service or a long-term supply agreement encompassing buffer stocks or other types of inventory management. We also provide market intelligence, engineer knowledge-based seminars, and also physical PCB characterizations and troubleshooting services. These all help to ensure that the long-term security of the product and your product is ensured. We began life in the 1960s as a manufacturer of quartz crystals in the UK. And as the markets for quartz crystals have changed over the decades, then so has my company. Today, if you like, we work as a fabless manufacturer of frequency-controlled devices, and we serve a diverse customer base in the UK and the rest of the world, with over 60% of our revenues being generated overseas. The products that we supply are specified by us and manufactured to our final design requirements in one of several manufacturing centres located in various geographical locations. This helps prevent against political and natural disasters, and also giving a diverse manufacturing base to get a secure supply chain to you. Using this business model, we have invested in a detailed quality assurance protocol with factory standard test facilities in the UK, as well as frequent visits and discussions with our manufacturing partners to ensure that our products are consistent electrically and are reliable performance-wise. And having these several manufacturing options protect our customers from geographic natural disasters such as floods, earthquakes, and such like. We've invested time and resources in our logistics, which is another factor in the supply chain management. And we have partnered with the global freight organizations, set up logistics hubs in Hong Kong, and to minimize the cost of door-to-door product delivery wherever they're required. Supply chain security comes from dealing with suppliers that know their product. They know their customers, and ideally have some control over the manufacturing process, or at least have a direct line of communication with the manufacturer and have a track record in resilience and reliability. In fact, my company has been in existence for over half a century, is, I believe, a testament in our ability to provide supply chain security in a turbulent world.
Excellent. Thank you, Gary. Yeah. Okay.
My name is Brian Ellison. I'm the president of America 2 Electronics. We're an independent distributor, global independent distributor. We live supply chain security every day. We work very closely with Mark's company as well. Part of that is, when I think about supply chain security, it deals with the issue of counterfeit, and the way that we control that at America 2 is controlling our supply base to begin with. So,
hold the mic.
Oh, I'm sorry. Controlling the supply base as far as having very stringent vendor qualifications, knowing your vendor, visiting your vendor, understanding their processes, and are their processes in line with your quality expectations. It's who you buy from. We buy from over 400 component manufacturers direct. We buy through franchise distribution, so it's part of controlling that. It's also about the inspection process when product comes in. We do quite a bit of inspection internally from a visual and physical standpoint, and then we have partners like Mark's company around the world where we must understand how to dig into that higher level of testing and try to mitigate the counterfeiters. Now, that aside, there's also the supply chain security point of the end of life and lifetime buys. I can't. It's certainly a disruption in supply chain, but if it weren't for that, America 2 would lose a lot of business from that standpoint. So when we think about that, you think about the manufacturer's product life cycles. So what, there's 6 months to maybe 12 to 18 months, but OEM product life cycles are 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, and maybe even 10 years. So the way that we try to help mitigate with our customers is to plan ahead for that, and that's by stocking inventory. And we have $1 billion in inventory at market value, and that is that's an inventory-centric model that allows us to help mitigate those issues from an end-of-life, lifetime buy standpoint for our customers.
Thank you. Yep, fantastic. Thanks, Brian. Positive.
Hello, my name is Pete Schopp. I'm Senior Vice President of Business Operations at Mouser. John, thank you for allowing us to participate in this event. Really, I see it really as two things. Again, I think from a customer standpoint, biggest concern, everybody's hit on it, is the idea of counterfeit. Where we've kind of mitigated that is we only buy from either authorized distributors, but primarily we buy direct from the manufacturer. That is our relationship. That is the only place we're getting parts. We are AS9120, so we can provide all the traceability documents that the customer may require. The second side of that is, so many people or so many distributors are working on such a high turn model that we really do not have to follow. We are part of the TTI group, and Paul Andrews, when he started the company, he always wanted to be very rich in inventory. Luckily, our new boss, Mr. Buffett, understands that model also and is allowing us to continue to invest in inventory. We have an advantage that even though technically the corporation reports quarterly, we're basically not material. So our number just kind of gets thrown in with a whole bunch of other people's numbers. So we're not required to meet quarterly goals, and it's never Mr. Buffett's goals, but he's looking for long-term growth, and that means having inventory available to sell.